Greetings, everyone. I'm Rabbi Jay Lyons from the National Association of Chevra Kadisha. Today we are going to talk about the importance and the beauty of Jewish burial. We're going to define Jewish burial and the meaning behind the many important customs. We're going to have a look into our belief in the afterlife and exactly what we're doing when we prepare our loved ones for burial, and gain many insights along the way. I wanted to start with a quote from a book called the Chachmas Adam. It was written about 100 years ago, and this is the introduction to the issues of Jewish burial. And here's what he says. It's very important. It is a great obligation to not stray even a little bit from the accepted customs. For even if a custom is small in our eyes, it is very significant in heaven and may be very important for the merit of the deceased. And it is through this meticulousness that we will be called practitioners of true kindness. And this is going to be our mantra throughout. We are going to get into some issues that are very, very detailed, some things we would even call minutia, but we see that they're very important, and all of the customs that we do when it comes to Jewish burial are very rich in our heritage and very important not only to the mourners but also to the soul of the deceased. Overview of today's talk is going to be, we're going to define Jewish burial, we're going to get into a little bit of the background of philosophy, then we're going to circle back with a whole new appreciation of why we do what we do when it comes to Jewish burial. So just to define Jewish burial for a moment, the essential elements are Shmira, which is the vigil, it's the guard. The Tahara, which is the preparation. Tachrichim are shrouds. The Aron is the casket. Eulogy, we know what that is. The Levaya is the escort, we'll talk about that, but meaning to say that from the time that we eulogize the person, we also escort the deceased to the grave. And then there's the grave itself and in-ground burial, specifically in-ground burial, not cremation or mausoleum entombment, but specifically burying them in the ground. So just to keep it simple, the basic understanding is Shmira, the vigil, is the guard. It is very simply to make sure that the body is not going to be adversely affected, but also the idea is that from the moment that the person passes away, we don't leave them alone. Part of that is a matter of sensitivity, that we don't want to make it seem like now that they're dead, we're just casting them aside, like they're no longer useful, like they're discarded. We don't want to, God forbid, give that impression. And also an important part of what the watchman, what the shomer does, is that he does say prayers and he says psalms as a way of comforting the soul and praying for the soul. The Tahara is the preparation. Part of the Tahara, an essential element, is washing the body, and the idea being that when a newborn baby comes into this world, first thing we do is we clean them. And what we do when we go from this world to the next world is a very similar thing, and we clean them. We'll talk about the next world a little bit later. During the Tahara, prayers are said for the merit of the deceased, for the atonement for the deceased, and we are also preparing the person for what we're going to call their ultimate Yom Kippur. And again, we're going to touch on that a lot later as well. Tachrichim are the shrouds. Now, the shrouds aren't just any type of clothing. There's tremendous meaning behind the way that we make the Jewish shrouds, the Tachrichim. One thing is that there are no pockets. There are no cuffs. Nothing. Why? Because we want to show that all the material wealth that a person might be able to acquire in this world, they can't take it with them when they go. The only thing we can take with is our accomplishments. Also, the shrouds are made similar to the garments the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would wear one day a year on Yom Kippur. There was a special service that was done when the temple stood in Jerusalem, or the tabernacle in the desert, and the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would wear special white garments made of linen, and he would do that service. And we replicate that. We'll touch on this a lot more later, but we replicate that for each and every one of us. Each one of us is dressed like the Kohen Gadol, because we are about to have our ultimate Day of Atonement. The Aron is the casket. Using a casket is the prevalent custom outside of Israel, although they tend not to use them in Israel. Now, later we're going to talk about in-ground burial, so how could it be that you can accomplish in-ground burial if you're going to bury in a casket? The answer is you have to use a biodegradable casket. But not only that, we also are particular to not use metal at all, not in the screws or nails or hinges or any such thing. And the idea being that metal, although it's very useful, but metal is also a weapon of war. And we want to show only peace at this moment. The eulogy, the idea behind the eulogy is that we want to appreciate the loss. The comforting, the mourning process in Judaism is not one of distraction, but it is one of coming to the real grips of the loss in our lives and the void that we have because we no longer have our loved one. The eulogy is the beginning of that. The Talmud says that the reward of the person giving the eulogy is the tears of the attendees, meaning to bring people to cry over the loss and to bring people to be inspired by the life of the deceased. That is the goal of the eulogy. The levaya, the escort. So the word for grave is kever. And that word is also used by our sages to refer to the womb. What's the connection? So the idea is the same way that we see the womb as being the conduit, the portal, the whatever term you want to use, the corridor from one existence to a very different existence. The grave is the same thing. The grave is not that we believe that the only life is a life in this world and when you die that's it, but we believe in an eternity. And so the grave is sort of that same type of portal, that same type of corridor to the next world. So the same way that if you had a loved one who was going on a very long journey, right, if they were going to move to a foreign country and maybe never come back, so you probably wouldn't just drop them off at the airport. You'd probably park and walk in with them and try to go to the gate. I don't know if you can do that anymore. And you'd go as far as you could. Right? You'd escort them as far as you could. And that's what we do when we send off our loved ones on this ultimate journey. Burial in ground. So why is burial in ground so important? Why are we so particular to bury in the ground and not cremate or not bury above ground in a mausoleum, let's say? So first and foremost is that there is a verse in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 23, and this is the source, this is the mitzvah of Jewish burial. And this is where it says, now the context of this, let me take one step back here. The context of this is that we are not talking about a great person here. We are actually talking about someone who was executed by the Jewish court. So we are talking about it's fair to say we're talking about the dregs of society over here. And nonetheless, the mitzvah is don't leave them hanging, literally, but rather you should bury them that day because it is humiliating to Hashem that this person who was created in the image of God, it's humiliating to Hashem that this body should be left in such a degrading state, but rather you should bury them. So here's where we have the mitzvah of burial. But lest one say that, that's only for the great people, or I'm not so important, or something like that. Understand that the context of it is that we're talking about the lowest of the low over here. And even in that situation, Hashem looks at his creation, who made all the wrong choices, and cares for their dignity, and wants them to be returned to the earth. We're going to take a little bit of a trip here, and we're going to talk about body and soul. We're going to talk about life and afterlife, and we're going to circle back to all of these different issues with Jewish burial. So just very simple questions over here. What is the body? What is the soul? See, the body's kind of easy, because if I ask you what your body is, right, your body is it's your face, it's your hands, it's your feet, right? What's the soul? How are we going to define the soul? And what is the relationship between the body and the soul now? And what's it going to be like for the soul once there's no longer a body? will the soul remember the body? Like what's going to happen? So just very simply, who are you? So are you your body? Right? If you think about it, if I would say, everybody points at themselves, you point, right? Your brain. Now, if you think about it, right, the brain is pretty useful. People point to themselves. They say, "Here I am." They kind of point to their heart. But the truth is, we know you could have a heart transplant, and we would probably still identify the recipient as the recipient, not as the donor anymore. The brain. There's a lot going on there, right? The brain is all of our thoughts, all of our memories. So maybe the essence of the person is the brain. But the truth of the matter is that the brain is just an organ. Maybe if we talk about a mind beyond the brain, right? Our personality. What is our personality? Our body, or what is that? That's already like a little bit different, right? You can have identical twins whose bodies look alike, but they have very different personalities. They have very different memories. They have very different ambitions and passions because they are two unique people. And that is exactly what makes each one of us unique. Our personality, our passions, our ambitions, our memories. All of these things are what I would define as the soul. That is the essence of the person. This is just a little joke here, but the truth is there's a beauty to that cartoon, which is that, of course, hungry and tired are not even emotions, right? That's the physical. Those are the physical feelings that we have, but those aren't the emotions. But the emotions are the greatness of the person. Those are the depth. That's the depth of the person. Okay, so the question becomes, what happens to me after I die? And the answer is that I never die, because I am not my body. I am my soul. I am my essence. The essence of me is my personality. The essence of me is my emotion, my ambition, my passion, my memories. That's the essence of me. That never dies. The body will die. So the body and soul, so are they friend? Are they foe? I mean, they don't seem to have similar goals if you think about it. If we're going to find this soul as some, lofty spiritual being, and that I'm going to identify with, and it's my passion and whatnot. So then the body is kind of like almost an animal. So maybe they're foes. But the truth of the matter is that every mitzvah that the soul would want to do, all of the spiritual yearning that the soul has, can't do anything without the body. The soul can't give money to tzedakah without the body. The soul can't participate in a Passover Seder without the body. The soul can't even honor its mother and father, but for the fact that it has a body that was physically born to those individuals. So the body and soul really, they both bring something to the table, and they both help each other out in a beautiful mission of life. To the extent that really, neither one wants the relationship to end. Now, the only issue is, though, that people die. The body is going to die. But the soul is going to continue on, only in a different realm, which we'll define in a moment. And the other question is going to be, how does the soul feel towards the body? So the answer is that you have to have the attitude of never forget those who were there for you when no one else was. Body and soul are partners, life partners. The body is useless now, but that doesn't mean that the soul is just going to disregard the body and cast it aside. None of us could ever do that to somebody. And in fact, in the book of Job, chapter 14, verse 22, it says, "But his flesh pains him, and his soul mourns over him." And we can clearly see that there's a connection between the body and the soul. That sometimes, we can kind of relate to the cartoon, the joke of the cartoon. So you see how the soul's looking down on the body in a state of indignity, and the soul is pained by that. And that's exactly the point from the verse in Job. We have other different cartoons like that. All of these I'm showing just to bring out the point that we can relate to the idea of the soul having an emotional connection to the body, even after they parted ways. Now, another idea going with this, and another idea for burial, which is a very important one, is from Kohelet, from Ecclesiastes, chapter 12. This is towards the end. This is verse 7, and it says that the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the soul returns to God who gave it. And this is a beautiful verse because what it does is that it shows that the soul really is not at peace until the body is at peace. The soul can't return to its source, God, until the soul is at peace with the fact that the body has returned to its source. We're going to go on a little bit of a different road right now, and we're going to talk about the afterlife. So just the afterlife is a whole complicated thing, but sort of the elevator pitch, the Cliff Notes version of the afterlife goes like this. This is just a joke, right? If you're looking for easy answers, you came to the wrong place. But we're going to make it a little bit of an attempt here. Joseph and his brothers. You know the story of Joseph and his brothers. He was they sold him into slavery, from one slavery to a different one. He ends up in prison in Egypt. From prison, he ends up being the viceroy of Egypt after giving Pharaoh advice about saving up for 7 years of plenty. During the 7 years of plenty, saving up for the 7 years of famine. And so here we are. So Joseph is the viceroy. Egypt is the breadbasket of the world. They're the only ones with any food. There's famine anywhere else. His brothers come down to get food, but they also want to check on his welfare. All types of crazy things are happening between money being returned to them and them ending up in prison. And in fact, Shimon, one of the brothers, ended up staying in prison. Joseph lets everybody else go. They don't know that they're talking to Joseph. He says, don't come back without your youngest brother, Benjamin. So eventually they convince their father to let them take Benjamin down. Right? Judah takes responsibility for him. The goal is to get food. The goal is to get Shimon out of prison. And there they are. So they meet Joseph, and Joseph says, he's playing around with them, and he ends up planting his cup in Benjamin's sack. They end up getting caught. Says Benjamin's going to be a slave forever to him. Yehuda takes responsibility, and when Joseph sees that, so then finally what he says to them is, kicks everybody out of the room, except for his brothers, and he says, I am Joseph, is my father still alive? The brothers could not respond because they were confounded by his presence. They had no response. Now in the Talmud, Rabbi Elazar says that when he would get to this verse, he would cry, and he would say, the rebuke of flesh and blood evokes that response, how much more so the rebuke of the Holy One, blessed be He. Meaning to say that the rebuke that we are going to have on our own judgment day, after we pass away, is going to be similar to, although far more profound, than that which the brothers dealt with. But the question I would ask you is, what was Joseph's rebuke? He didn't say to them, why did you sell me? He didn't say to them, how could you do this to our father? He didn't say any of that. All he said was, very simply, he said, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? And they were confounded. They couldn't respond. Why? Because at that point, they saw the whole truth. They saw that if this man the whole time was Joseph, if he really wanted to hurt them, he had every opportunity to get away with it. So clearly, they misjudged him. Clearly, they misunderstood him. And it's that absolute understanding of the truth brings us to a very real understanding, like an acute understanding of what we're feeling, meaning they truly felt tremendous regret to the point that they couldn't even speak. There are certain things we do that we regret a little bit. There are certain things we do that we feel good about. There are certain things we feel great about. There are certain things that we really regret. And that is going to be, not that there's a heaven and hell, that you go through this door or you go through that door, but rather that there's an accomplishment and regret, and that in and of itself is going to be the reward and the punishment that we have in the world to come. Now, having said that if this world is where the opportunity is, and there's nothing that we can do in the hereafter, and the greatest reward is a sense of accomplishment, so then how is it possible, or is it possible, I should say, to accomplish anything after we die? And the answer is that what we can accomplish is that which we set in motion while we were alive. The inspiration that we were able to give to others while we were alive, that inspiration can be our greatest accomplishment. And in fact, to the extent that our sages say that the enabler, the person who enabled somebody, who inspired somebody to do a mitzvah, is greater than the person who actually did the deed themselves. But how can we inspire people who we never met? Meaning, fine, you have people who are around now that maybe they'll remember me, but what about the people who I didn't get to meet? What about the people who were born after I pass away? And that's where everything comes full circle. We do not dispose of the body. The last thing we would do is dispose of the body. What we do is that we return the body to the earth where it came from. That in and of itself is an inspiration for people around to see that this is the way that we deal with people who were helpful to us, who were kind to us, who were good to us, who are no longer able to do that. We don't discard people, we don't dispose of people. We honor people and we make sure that they are taken care of. Through seeing the tachrichim, the shrouds, we are reminded of the Kohen Gadol. We're reminded of the service on Yom Kippur, and we are reminded that we ourselves one day are going to be wearing those shrouds. We ourselves one day are going to be standing in front of God and giving a reckoning for everything that we did. That is an opportunity to inspire. That is something that we, the living, can see in any funeral that we go to, that we have that inspiration, whether we knew the person or we didn't. By hearing the eulogy, we are inspired by that which the person did. By being at the cemetery with so many of our deceased brethren, we see that we are part of a community that is not just a community right now, but that it has roots, it has heritage. We are part of something far bigger than ourselves. And that is also a tremendous responsibility and a tremendous inspiration. So just to review, we don't leave the body because we know that the soul is aware of what's going on, although possibly confused in this state of limbo, and so therefore we are a comfort to the soul. We do the Tahara because it is a way of honoring the soul by taking care of the body. We are preparing the person for Yom Kippur. We are praying for the soul of that person. We dress the person like the Kohen Gadol in order to show that there is a reward for doing mitzvot. We eulogize the person because that is the last and best opportunity for them to inspire us. By showing honor to the deceased, by escorting them, that is also a comfort to the soul, and that affirms our belief in a soul. And by returning the organic material, the body, to its source, we are providing a comfort to the soul, and the soul is finally at peace and can now move on its journey. Thank you very much, and I'm wishing you a lifetime and beyond of perception, accomplishment, opportunity, and inspiration.